Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. The Long Live Alternative Parties podcast.
Hi there, this is Andy.
Andy Moore. Friends, today we have Andy Moore from the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. He's going to talk to us about some interesting stuff. So welcome, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you. Let us get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief background biographical sketch.
Sure. And I am as you said, the executive director of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. We are a trade association for organizations who are working on electoral and democracy reform throughout the country, both large and small organizations, the folks that are on the ground doing the work, trying to make a change in the world.
Excellent. So what led you to get involved in this organization?
Sure. I have been involved in democracy reform in one form or another for a number of years. I actually live in Oklahoma and have started and run a couple of organizations here focused on transparency, things like the freedom of information, open records, open meeting, that government transparency and First Amendment issues that I think is absolutely core to our democracy. And then some other organizations that are more focused on civic engagement. And over time, the thing that we kept running into that I kept noticing is that a lot of the problems or the challenges that we would find in our democracy exist because of some sort of structural system in place that was maybe designed 250 years ago and is not exactly responsive to modern day, to society, to how Americans and how voters interact with their government, or how we expect to. And over time, we've certainly seen our democracy become subject to this very divisive two-party duopoly. And so I started looking at what are those solutions that are out there? How are the ways that we can fix this? And through that got connected to a number of different democracy or electoral reform organizations, and met many of the people working in the space. And so when this position came up at Nanner, I was thrilled and jumped at the opportunity to apply.
Excellent. So kindly explain the nature of your organization. You touched on it some already, but kindly explain what it does. And if I understood correctly, as you were explaining to me, it's a federation where you represent all these different organizations and they come together. They're each individual, yet it's a federation. Is that a correct assessment of it?
Yeah, we're a trade association. So if anyone is a member of some kind of professional association, maybe the big examples that we see in the news would be the American Medical Association or the American Psychological Association. There's for every industry there are a large number of associations that work on behalf of their members, right? As I said, I'm in Oklahoma. We've got a lot of oil and gas centric organizations, the Petroleum Alliance, groups like that. And by the same token, that is our position in the democracy ecosystem, is that we work with and on behalf of our member organizations who, while they are the ones doing the direct voter contact, they are working to working with the volunteers, grassroots, on the ground to make changes in their city or their state or even nationwide. Our job is to help serve those organizations, give them the tools, the resources, the training, the connections, the information they need to be more effective at doing their job.
Sounds good. So kindly give us some of the members of the organization. Who are some of the members?
Sure. So, some of the larger organizations are the ones that listeners might be most familiar with. Groups like Unite America, Represent Us, Fair Vote, Open Primaries, Rank the Vote, Stand Up Republic, Take Back Our Republic. We really have an independent voter project. I could keep going. I think we've got around 50 or 60 members right now. And some of those members are like affiliate organizations of one of those national groups. We're relatively new. We were founded in 2017, and so half of our organization's life has been in the midst of a pandemic, which, as everyone knows, lends a certain number of challenges to, to how work gets done. But we are constantly looking for and trying to connect with more organizations and more people who care about democracy reform, so we can find out, exactly what their needs are, and how we might be able to help them be more successful.
So how do organizations get affiliated with your organization, your trade representation, as you explained it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the easiest way is to go online. You can go to our website. It's nonpartisanreformers.org, and all the information's on there. And I'll share with your listeners that we've got some exciting changes coming out. Right now, we have a membership structure that has 3 tiers, but we're going to add in some options that would make it more accessible for smaller organizations. A lot of the groups around the country that are doing this very important work. I mean, literally trying to save our democracy by making these structural changes before it's too late, are volunteer led, right? They are people who take time out of their week, in the evenings and on weekends, to run coalitions or organizations, and they may not even be the ones who at this point are doing it full time. And we want to make sure that they are included in this, because as we've seen from a number of our larger organizations, what may start as small today will quickly grow into a larger organization that has, more activities, more influence, in their state, or in some cases, in a region, or nationwide. And so we want to help kind of catalyze that growth for organizations so they can be as successful as possible.
Sounds good. Sure. So kindly explain what types of activities and campaigns your organization does. Earlier, you mentioned how you provide resources and do training. What if somebody got involved in your organization and they wanted to enhance their skills? What type of training or resources would they encounter?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the, I'll frame it this way: kind of all of our activities fall into 3 categories, right? We like to say that we convene, we connect, and we catalyze. And I'll break those down. On the convening side, we hold an annual summit that all of our members are welcome to attend. Part of your membership dues is a ticket or multiple tickets to the summit, and it's a chance to meet and interact with people one on one, right, or in a group, or ideally face to face, or whatever virtual option we have available right now, uh, so that they can make some of those bridges, build some of those relationships, and really we try to say that we convene them because these are often the leading thinkers, the leading um, leaders in this space, and we want them to be in the room, right? It's like the song in Hamilton, like you want to be the ones that are in the room having these discussions, and building some consensus about what are the most effective and most practical reforms that we can accomplish, in a nationwide or in a given state, so that we can bring kind of all parties of interest to the table and get them on the same page to make that change. So that's the convening um, track or bucket. Connecting builds on that, and that is getting people connected both geographically, as well as connected on issues. And so, in fact, in October, we're going to be kicking off a new networking series that is aimed at this. It's called Reformers Unite, and it'll be the way that we connect people, geographically. So folks maybe in a state, let's say, especially larger states like Texas or California, but even smaller states, right, like Missouri or Iowa, where you have different people working on different kinds of reforms who we would hope they might know each other and might communicate, but I think we all know that doesn't always happen as often as it should. And so we are going to help our members who are working in a similar geographic area connect with one another, because there's often overlap in some of these reforms where supporters might be supportive of, let's say, open primaries and ranked choice voting. And this is a way to make sure that these groups are talking to one another, and identifying areas for for synergy or for power to be built collectively. And then also we're going to connect folks across issues, or within issues. So instead of just focus on one state, let's look at everyone in the country who is working on, we'll say, open primaries. Right, there's a lot of interest to be had across the country. One great example of that right now is about redistricting. So a couple of years ago, I was the campaign manager for an anti-gerrymandering um, ballot initiative here in my state, and through that process, I knew someone who knew someone in Virginia and in Arkansas, and so there was a few kind of ad hoc relationships that I was able to form, and those were really valuable because you got to hear what's working in other states, you got to hear their stories, their ideas. Sometimes they would have really great examples of events they held that we could replicate. And sometimes you hear stuff, you also hear their challenges, and you are thankful for the ones you have. And maybe you can be the one to help them out. And there's just that sense of collegiality that I think is often lost when you are, doing some of these reforms where you may feel like, you're kind of out on an island. And so we want to be very intentional and active in that process. And so those networking meetings will be held, virtually, using Zoom for right now. And that way we can do them twice a month, right? One geographic one issue focused one. And those will contain, a presentation from a subject matter expert, or maybe one of the members even. And then also time, in breakout rooms for folks to have those, smaller conversations like you would do in person if we were able to all be in the same space, and trying to just kind of help build and help folks make those connections. And then finally is catalyze, where we really want to put all of these connections, these convening thoughts, and these connections into practice. We want people to be able to take their information, take their any other trainings we do about, how to do grassroots organizing, how to manage the finances of an organization or a campaign, how to put together a communications plan, all the nuts and bolts of like how to do the work, and also how to be a good leader, how to balance self-care and time when you know that you are trying to get on the ballot and you've got a hard deadline. How do you hire and fire people in a way that is responsible and beneficial to your organization? We want to make sure that we train folks with that information as well, and then also put them in contact with vendors who might be supportive or helpful in the process. So what, like, one of our key partners is an organization called Citizen Data, and they provide nonpartisan voter file access. And all of our members, if you are a dues paying member of Nanner, then you get a discount on that data access. And it's really helpful. Everyone who uses it raves about it. You can, like any program, you can buy in access based on the number of records you need. So you don't have to buy a nationwide database if you just need it for, one city. And they have some really great kind of add-ons, some modeling, and some other kind of scores that they've built into their system that you won't find on other voter files, that are really specific and useful to the reform community. And so by putting all that together, we hope to, catalyze these efforts into passing tangible reforms throughout the country.
Wonderful. You got the alliteration going. That's great. Can you kindly discuss the executive director position? We have a lot of people out there in our audience who may want to get involved in nonprofit organizations in the reform space. So what does your responsibilities from a day-to-day basis entail? And also how does one become an executive director in an organization like yours?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, it's funny how much the nonprofit community has just adopted the term executive director, although it is not exclusive, right? So for some folks, it's CEO. For some folks, it's COO. For some people, it's like chief engagement guru, or you can really make whatever title you want. But day to day, for me, it looks like starting at the top, right? So trying to think about our strategy. We've been going through a strategic planning process the last 6 months or so, and so making sure that there is alignment between our board, between our staff, and between our members on the direction that we're headed as an organization, and then building out specific plans for how we can enact that vision for the benefit of our members. So that the convene, connect, and catalyze uh, buckets that I mentioned has stemmed from that. These new networking series has stemmed from that. Um, I might spend a few hours doing some research on speakers for our virtual summit that we'll be hosting later on this fall. Um, I spend a lot of time reaching out to our members, just checking in, seeing how things are going, making sure that learning what's working and hearing what's not, and maybe how we can help out, or if we can make an introduction or connect them to a resource that would be helpful. I also do a lot of networking a little bit outside of our bubble. So in the what we've called kind of the democracy ecosystem, there's our bubble, which are the reformers, the active practitioners that are trying to pass the reforms, and then we have a lot of friends and some members, some colleagues that work more in what we would call the bridging space. So the Bridge Alliance, who's also one of our members, they are arguably the hub of that space. And they are also a membership organization that tries to bring together organizations who are working on cross-partisan bridge building, trying to create a big tent and help people be better at communicating outside of their particular ideological bubble, right? And how do we build that civic trust, and how do we build those bridges, honestly, between neighbors, in a way. And so I spend a lot of time on calls with that group, members of that group, because you can't pass a reform unless you can talk to people, right? And a lot of the folks in the bridge building community recognize that the thing that would make our politics less divisive is to be able to talk to one another, but also to change some of the structural things, to help folks kind of help equalize the playing field. And then there's also like maybe a third bubble of academics and policy wonks. And so I spent some time reading and talking to those folks about research, polling, what the trends are that we're seeing, and how that information can flow into to help what we do, and how to help our members. Then there's like the other basic operational stuff of planning out budgets and finances, and making sure that checks get written and bills get paid.
That is good information. We appreciate that. Can you kindly tell our audience how they can support your organization?
Sure, yeah. So we are different, I think, than a lot of organizations. You won't hear me actively solicit donations directly for our organization. If you're interested in donating to someone, I would encourage listeners to go on our website and find one of our members that they would like to support most directly, because they are the ones doing, as I said, the grassroots work, the work on the ground, and they, by and large, are 501(c)(3s, and your donations would be tax deductible to them, and it helps them do what they are doing for that direct voter contact. Now, I say that with also a caveat that we are always looking for members, and so based on who I would imagine your listenership is, there may be organizations, including alternative parties. Like I can think of at least two alternative parties who are members of our organization because their whole platform is based around some sort of democracy reform. And so we would love to expand that side of things. There's a lot of research that indicates that a multi-party system, and having, in fact, like 5 to 6 parties that are strong parties and all kind of work together to build a more of a coalition government would solve a lot of the dysfunction we see in government. Um, and so if that's you, listeners, please go to our website, nonpartisanreformers.org, and send us a note. See if membership's right for you. I'd love to connect with you and have a phone call and see what's going on in your world and how we might be able to help.
Sounds like a plan. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on our show today and sharing all the great information about what your organization does.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been great.
All the best to you and your organization.
Thank you.
Bye now.